I'm trying to teach somebody something. Sometimes there's value in starting from the beginning and laying things out systematically and really thinking things through. If you're going to write a book, there's a lot of value in that. You might even, the first chapter of your book might just be you defining terms that you're going to be using throughout your book. You might have a very lengthy introduction where you, if you're going to translate something, your introduction might lay out all the rules you're going to use in translation, which words you're going to use, leave untranslated, which ones you're going to translate, why you chose to translate them the way you did, maybe the rules of the original language that you're pulling from so people can go and compare what you've done to the original and measure against the original. You might talk about your background and then you're going to do translation. If you're writing like a real serious philosophical piece, you're going to lay out your methodology at the outset. If you have any premises that you're assuming, especially if you're a philosopher and you're making an argument, you'll actually tell your audience what your premises are. Like if you look at like a simple logical syllogism, simple deductive logic in the form of syllogism, you'll have what's called a major premise. Your major premise is that all women are immortal. And then your minor premise is an instance of the major premise. All women are immortal, and Anandini is a woman. And then what you do is almost like math. So you got all women, mortal. Anandini is a woman. This is Anandini. You can tell she's a woman because she's fat. Baby. All women, mortal. Anandini is a woman. Women, mortal. Anandini, woman. And then you cross out these two terms, women and woman. And you're left with Anandini is mortal. Do you guys follow that? You cross out, just like in algebra, you cross out that common term and you're left with a new point, which is Anandini is mortal. Do you guys follow that? So sometimes you'll have a much more complicated proof that might have 6 or 7 or 8 steps. And if you're a serious philosopher, nobody really makes mistakes in terms of logic. If you're making a mistake in terms of logic, generally you're schizophrenic. And I don't mean that, I'm not being facetious. I mean, sometimes you meet people like where 2 + 2 equals purple. And you talk to them and it becomes very clear that they're disconnected from reality. And you say things to them or you discuss things with them and their brain doesn't process. It's almost like dyslexia, but it's a cognitive, maybe beyond cognitive. It's like cognitive is the only word I think of, but I'm assuming dyslexia also involves some degree of cognition. It's more like visual. You misplace words and letters and such. But you actually think wrong. You meet people like that. I genuinely don't like to associate with people like that. Because you really have no idea what's going to happen when you associate with them. Because anything can add up to anything else. Did you follow this? Like there's a guy who just last weekend went on a one-on-one, drove his car into oncoming traffic to kill his 4 children and his wife, and drove his car into oncoming traffic and killed his wife. Didn't die himself, jumped out of the car, ran across the freeway, got hit by a truck going 60, still didn't die. Now he's been arrested for murder and attempted murder. His kids all survived, but they hit an 18-wheeler on the one-on-one. And he said to the kids, we're going back to heaven today. He got in the car and then drove into oncoming traffic, killed all his kids. When you deal with somebody who's mentally disturbed like that, you get no kind of anchor point. You know, like if you're talking to a liar who lies to like cheat you for money, then you know, like, okay, I can't trust you, but there's money on the table. That's why I can't trust you. You follow? You meet people and you can kind of figure them out, what makes them tick. And even if they're not trustworthy, at least you can sort of map their lack of trustworthiness based on some human impulse or human need that you can then map and figure out and kind of navigate with them. Does this make sense? You guys have a little sidebar?
I had a question about that.
I'm just going to keep going. All right, here we go. Even if you're dealing with people where it's difficult to relate to them, trust them, normally people are logical. So if you figure out what makes them tick and what motivates them, you can still liaise with them on some level. Did you guys follow that? When you get somebody who's actually schizophrenic, those rules don't work. You're like, hey, you looked hungry, so I brought you something to eat, and then they could determine imminent threat, shoot that person in the face. Like there's no, you follow? Because they live in Alice in Wonderland, where the rules of decided to have decent posture all of a sudden, just jamming me up. They live in Alice in Wonderland, where like the rules of Euclidean geometry don't apply. They live in just like a different universe with actual, just like ever morphing different rules of logic that you can never quite figure out because they're changing. And so it's like trying to climb a rock face where the holding points change at any moment. And what was a holding point, now all of a sudden you drop off and you're always one step away from death. You guys follow that? Most people aren't like that. Most people are logical. They might have stupid ideas. They might be really dumb, or they might be really smart with really stupid values. But you can at least get a beat on them. And there's this promise that I spend enough time with you and I unpick your stupidity, we'll be able to get somewhere. Do you guys follow this? But, anyway, sometimes you get these people where that doesn't apply. I generally avoid those people like the plague. I don't want to be offensive to the plague or the schizophrenics, figure of speech, but there you go. People still die of the bubonic plague. You guys know that? I was surprised to find that out. I think like it still exists. People still get it. The Black Death is still around. In this country, other countries, every few years, a little outbreak, a little mini outbreak. I didn't realize that. Somehow, that's what I do in my free time, is I research, generally understood as defunct diseases and try to figure out if they're still in play. So if you get a good philosopher, he'll take the trouble to explain to you the premises of his argument. So if he has a more complicated argument than a major premise and a minor premise and a natural conclusion, he'll have, let's say, a 6 or 7 stage argument with 6 or 7 premises in play, each one of which has to be true, and then they all coalesce together into math to prove his idea. Nobody makes mistakes of logic. Most of you don't make mistakes of logic. Sometimes you might get caught up on some little mini fallacy. That happens occasionally. Like, all monkeys like bananas, Radha Shyam likes bananas, ergo, Radha Shyam must be a monkey. But because we didn't say only monkeys like bananas, and him liking bananas doesn't prove that he's a monkey. If we said all monkeys like bananas, and we said Radha Shyam doesn't like bananas, then what have we proved? We proved that he isn't a monkey. We can prove the negative, but we can't prove the positive. There are little things like that where people make little mistakes, but it's almost like a little, it's like an optical illusion, but with ideas. You follow? You're not actually illogical. You're logical, but you're not super meticulous in your logic. So sometimes something will sound prima facie logical at first glance, and you haven't trained yourself to meticulously pick through, and so you might get caught up in a little fallacy here and there. You guys following this? But the very fact you get caught up on a logical fallacy means you're logical, you're just not meticulous in your logic. Did you follow that? So a serious philosopher will tell you, here are my premises. Then a super serious philosophy will tell you, if you want to attack my premises, these are the two that I think are weakest, and here are the primary attacks that would be used against my premises, and here are my responses to those primary attacks, and here's the ones that I think have merit and the ones that don't have merit, and we've only got time to cover this much, but this is like open for the next book to be written, and I'm opening the door for my interlocutors, for the guys who want to argue with me, to know how they can best argue with me. In case you want to write a subsequent book or take me to task, I'm laying it all out for you. Here are my premises. These ones you can't attack, otherwise you're an idiot. But here, these two are questionable. This is the one I think is most questionable. Here are the primary ways to attack them. That's why they're all stupid. They don't know what they're talking about. But here's one guy who attacked my premise in a good way. And that I think that attack actually has some merit. And here are my counters to it, but I don't think it's 100%. It's not a lot. And that's where there might be some room for some further debate. Did you guys follow that?
Yeah.
That all happened at the beginning of the book. You've read contemporary philosophy, right? This isn't classical philosophy that will do this. But contemporary philosophers will do this. They'll really, so there's stuff, if you want to be complete, there's all sorts of ways you can be complete. You can teach yoga, teacher training. There's a value in being complete. If you can do a 300, then usually you're not as complete as if you do a 200. You guys know about YTT 200s and 300s? Your introductory yoga teacher training is a 200 hour. That's probably what many of you take. Who's got a YTT 200 under the belt? There you go. And the next level up is a 300. Who's got a 300 under the belt on top of 200 to make a 500? Who's got that? Exactly. So the 300 is your next course. It's like, it's not fair to say this to academics, but it's like the master's course. Of course, it's not equivalent to a master's course. It takes you 4 or 5 years to get an undergraduate and another couple to get a master's. And so why would you compare that to 200 and 300 hours, which is a matter of months instead of a matter of years? You follow? It's unfair, but that's what it's equivalent to. Now, when you take a master's course, you don't necessarily go over the same information you go in your undergraduate work. It's understood, you've already understood all the undergraduate stuff, and now we're going to focus a little bit in on the detail. Does that make sense? So, whereas you'll learn basics of anatomy, you'll learn basics of sequencing for yoga, asana, and you'll learn, some different stuff. Asanas and how to put them together, which is called sequencing, or vinyasa in Sanskrit. And, a little anatomy, a little philosophy, a little this, that, and the other. Throw a little masala on there, and you're good to go. You got a YTT under your belt, which is, gets you a whole lot of nothing. Unless you're good, unless you had some gymnastic ability prior to taking yoga, and if you have some gymnastic ability prior to taking yoga, maybe a 200 is going to get you a job in yoga studio. You guys follow this? If you don't have any prior gymnastic ability, you're not going to get a job. 200 hours is not enough time for you to, get it together. Does that make sense? So, in a 300, you won't go back and teach all the preliminary stuff you taught. You'll start to get into some details. Assuming that there's a base of knowledge on the part of the people you're teaching. Does that make sense? Okay. That whole thing, which I just thought of that when I sat down. Actually, I thought what I want to talk about, and then as I started talking, then I tangented. So now that whole thing was your intro. I don't want to explain to you why it's reasonable and logical to believe in God, how consciousness can't be materially accounted for, how it represents a basic facet of reality. I'm not going to do that today because I don't feel like it. Sometimes I want to spread my wings, fly, leave the nest. I don't want to crawl. I want to run, jump, and play. And so that's what we're going to do today. That's what I thought about doing when I sat down. So I've got a couple of verses from the Gita. They occur at the outset of the Gita. But I think, at least the way I want to read them today, what I want to explore with you guys today as I read them, I think that it's I think I would term this to be a little bit more intermediate level stuff. Did you guys follow that? All right, here we go. A couple of verses. Yam imam pushpitam vacham pravanti avipaschitaha. Pravadanti avipaschitaha. Ya imam pushpitam vacham. This flowery speech, which pravadanti, they proclaim. Who proclaims it? Avipaschita, the ignorant. The ignorant. Ignorant people proclaim this flowery speech. Nanyat astiti vadina. Saying there is nothing else. Nanyat astiti. That iti, astiti, asti means there is. Na anyat, there is no other. There is nothing else. And then the iti at the end of it means quotation marks in Sanskrit. So if you want to quote somebody literally in Sanskrit, you'll say iti. And that indicates that you're quoting them literally. So avipaschita pravadanti. Ignorant people proclaim yam imam pushpitam vacham, this flowery speech, there's nothing more than this. These people are Veda Vada Rata. They are attached to the words of the Veda. Veda Vada Rata. This is what's called anyway, it's a compound phrase. Those people who are attached to the words of the Vedas, they proclaim that there is nothing more than this. What? Than the flowery words of the Vedas. They proclaim what those flowery words say. Those flowery words. Kamatmana swarga para. These people who are attached to the words of the Vedas, they're also kamatmana. They're also filled with desires, and they are swarga para. They are intent on going to heaven. Jamma karma palam pradam. They are offering you rebirth as they are giving you rebirth as the fruit of your work. Kriya Vishesha Bahulam. And they have many different rituals. Bhoga Shwaya Gatim Prati. Which all have a goal towards enjoyment and opulence. You guys follow that? So let me say it again. And I'm just doing it as the verses occur. What I'd have to actually do is what's called anvaya, which is where you take... Sanskrit doesn't depend on you doing everything like subject, object, verb is the way a standard sentence would be done in Sanskrit, as opposed to our subject, verb, object in English. But you don't actually need to do that. You can reverse the order and do whatever you want to do. And so usually what you do is kind of put it together in a nice sentence, which we'll do. I'll read Prabhupada's translation in just a second. But I wanted to go through the Sanskrit with you in order. So the verse says, Avipaschita pravadanti. The ignorant people say, Nanyat asti vadina, that there's nothing more than this. Imam pushpitam vacham, flowery language in the Vedas. Veda Vada Rata. The people who are really attached to the words of the Vedas say that. And those people who are attached to the words of the Veda are kamatmana swarga para. They are filled with desires and they want to go to heaven. Jama karma palam pradam. And what they give you is the fruit of your labor. They give you rebirth. And then Kriya Vishesha Bahulam. They have many different rituals. Boga Shwaya Gatim Prati, that all have as their goal enjoyment and opulence. You guys follow that? All right. So, what does that mean? And what are the problems you see right on the surface with those two verses I read? Here's Prabhupada's translation. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, results in good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there is nothing more than this. It's a pretty straight translation. I think there's a few like bells and whistles that Prabhupada added, or, we could get into that, but I don't think there's any need to. It's a pretty straight translation. What does that mean? What's being done here? What's Krishna trying to do here? What's he trying to accomplish by these two verses? And what immediate glaring things do you see that require to be dealt with and overcome to make sense out of this and not have it be vexing, confusing? You understand my questions? Understand my questions? You guys got that? Let me say it one more time. What's Krishna trying to communicate to you? You guys have a straight translation, a super clean translation now. So what's Krishna trying to communicate to you? Or to us? And additionally, what massive, big problems do we have to overcome so this verse is not merely confusing? You got it? Okay. Go. Oh, and by the way, it has to be done in that order. Do you know why it has to be done in that order? Because if you don't know what Krishna's saying, how can you possibly tell me what's confusing about it? Duh. You follow? There has to be some kind of order of operations. You follow? So the order of operations is, don't raise your hand unless you can tell me what Krishna's trying to communicate, and then you can tell me what's wrong with it. But you can't tell me what's wrong with it if you don't know what he says. You got that? You follow that? Otherwise, it's just going to be like what you had for lunch is going to be coming up as like bad gas or something like that. But if we want to discuss what Krishna said and troubleshoot it, we have to at least understand what he said. I just told you what he said. I just want you to breathe a little life into it. Paraphrase it in your own language. Okay, ready? Go. Did you unraise your hand, Lola? I mean, I have no confidence in you now. I wasn't sure. I was kind of 50-50, but with an intro like that, I'm just going to go to my man Ross. Because Ross, you have a little more confidence, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm looking for confidence, by the way. If you guys raise your hand, I call you like, and it's like, just don't do it to me. Don't do it to me. Because I got lots of stuff to say. I'm going to share the mic. You guys got to be on point. Let's go. What do you got? Yell at me so I don't have to repeat it.
Krishna is saying that that you want to avoid people who are really attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, and particularly the parts of the Vedas that focus on the materialistic rituals, which are all focused on getting more material opulences and whatever, money, power, or whatever.
Don't stop screaming at me, baby.
Higher planets, etc. And he's saying that you need to avoid listening to those people because they're just leading you to constant rebirth and nothing higher.
That's an excellent recap of what Krishna said. Really well done. And did you hear that? Excellent. All right. Krishna's saying, don't be attached to these people who are really into the Vedas and all that ritual that's designed to make you upwardly mobile in the material world. Those are bad people. They're materialistic people, and we want you to avoid them. All these people are super attached to the Vedas, are memorizing the Vedas, are following all the rules of the Vedas, are recommending all the rituals of the Vedas. We're not into those guys. Because they're lusty and greedy, and they might have some kind of idea of upward mobility. But we're not into that. We're into something else. And so you got to avoid those guys like the plague, or like a schizophrenic. Probably gonna English like people hate, like probably like a schizophrenic society in America. It's gonna out me, cancel me in 5 minutes. I'm gonna watch it. That's an excellent recap. All right, we don't need to do any more recapping because my man just slayed it out the gate. Dragon Slayer over there. So now we can move right along to number 2. 2 crowns, question number 2. You guys remember what question number 2 is? Okay, who's got an answer for me? Question number 2, for all of you who are lying and don't remember, is what's wrong with that verse? What problem do we have to overcome so the verse doesn't become confounding and disturbing and vexing? Ready, aim, fire. Yeah, Nick.
What Krishna is saying, since it's part of the Bhagavad Gita, is part of the Vedas, so does that mean you're not supposed to listen to Krishna? Because he's in
Krishna in the Gita is speaking in a Vedic text. And so if you're not supposed to follow the Vedas, then you shouldn't follow Krishna's words in the Gita either, in which case we shouldn't even take the time to understand what he said here. And by rejecting the Vedas, we're also rejecting him. Maybe we could get around that by saying the Gita is the creme de la creme of the Vedas. We could say something like that. But at least we have the problem that the Vedic literature gets quoted by Krishna in multiple places in the Gita itself. He's quoting from a pre-existing tradition because Krishna didn't speak the Gita at the dawn of creation. And therefore there was already a full religion in play that Krishna makes use of, like Jesus made use of the Old Testament, for example, and then built on that as a skeleton, filled it in, added things to it. So Krishna himself quotes from the Vedas somewhat significantly in the Gita. I mean, at least, off the top of my head, at least half a dozen or 8 times. And several half chapters are dedicated to exploring themes which are first articulated in the Vedas. In a lot of ways, in the entire language of the Gita, Sanskrit, which is the language of the Vedas, so many philosophical ideas that are developed and first evolved in the Vedic literatures are made use of by Krishna, some of which don't even get modified, they just get used as they are. And so Krishna certainly seems to be a part of the Vedic culture. And yet he's a loyal oppositionist. He's criticizing. Like you got the Blue Dogs. You guys know what the Blue Dogs are? The Blue Dogs are Democrats. That's why they're blue. But they oftentimes vote with the Republicans. They're like a block of conservative Democrats that sometimes vote with the Republicans. And so you get this loyal opposition. They're part of your party, but they might vote against you. And so Krishna's being like a loyal opposition, but his critique of the Vedas is quite substantial. And in a world that raised that faith in the Vedas, venerate the Vedas, and here's Krishna essentially trying to break our faith in the Vedas. Certainly that requires to be dealt with and troubleshot. And I kind of generalized what you said, Nick. The point you made was quite specific, but it was an instance of a much more general point. You guys follow this? Does that make sense? Does that doubt, does that question make sense? What do you think? Does that question make sense? You, yes.
Me?
No, man behind you, blue shirt, glasses. Does that question make sense? Well, I don't know if you're spacing out or what. That's okay. If you poker face me too hard, I start thinking like you want to fight with me or something like that. So I'm going to call you out. Like when I ask questions like yes or no, and people just go, bro, like what? You trying to like mad dog me? Like from a liquor store? What's going on? Like we're having a class. I mean, nod, you shake your head yes or no, or do it I don't know. Or give me something. We're not playing poker. Does this make sense? Who thinks this doesn't make sense? Let's do that. Who thinks I don't understand the problem? All right. So this is pretty substantial. We got Krishna at the outset of a Vedic text telling us not to like the Vedas, and also at the same time throughout the text venerating the Vedas in various ways, continuing with Vedic thought. But he's got this massive critique at the outset of these Veda Vada Ratas, that people are attached to the Veda, like it's a bad thing. And this pushpavachams, flowery words, that sounds almost nice, right? But flowery words in the sense of empty words. They're just all fluff and no substance. That's what Krishna's saying. So how do we reconcile Krishna's scathing critique of the Vedas with the idea that Krishna is also on some level representing the Vedas? How do we take those two things and marry them together so they make sense? So we're not left with something which does not compute. It's illogical. It can't work. Premise number one, the Vedas suck. Premise number two, I like the Vedas. So you suck? Like what? I don't get it. How do I logically put that together? All men are mortal. Anani's not a man, therefore she's not mortal. That's the modus tollens. All men, only men are mortal. All women are mortal, Anani's a woman, therefore she's mortal. That makes sense. Those ideas fit together. You follow? The Vedas suck. Vedas Shasavera Hameva Vedya, by all the Vedas that we know, Krishna makes that statement in the Gita too. How do you compute them? How do you link those two things together? How are those things not mutually exclusive? Did you guys follow this? Okay, go. You look confident. With the shade. What's up with you guys? You got guys in the back? Have the rock shade?
Okay, I have a bunch of these, right? They're like chakra glasses. So they're not like sunglasses, but they're just I can see things for
Dude, all I have to say to you is you're sitting next to my man who's got the monster shades. Those the ultimate savage shades. That dude is a straight gangster. You check him out? And you're sitting next to him and you're totally imitating him. Trying to catch some of his shine. So I'm just calling it out. You even made the power play by doubling up on the chair. So you're the Lizard King over there. Okay, what do you got for us?
Well, there's what you said in the beginning, right?
Hold on, you gotta yell at me because I'm from you. So either you gotta do one, two things.
Okay.
You either have to scream bloody murder at me, in which case it's cool because I have to repeat everything for everybody else. Or number two, option two, if you can't scream at me because you don't have proper vocal cords. You have little mini vocal cords, like a micro vocal cord type thing going on. Then you gotta speak super succinctly so I can quickly repeat what you say. Culturally. If I ask Raj Kamu to yell at me, he'll be like, yes, Bhagwan, I will yell at you. Yes. It's just not in his DNA to scream at me. Ross, just by berating Ross for a couple of years, he's not yelling at me. We're all good. So if you can't scream at me, plus you're pretty far away, then you got to say it succinctly. Go.
Okay.
Oh, my man.
All right. So, like you said in the beginning, Krishna is he's all perfect. Everything he does is transcendental.
I didn't say that. I believe that.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that. So do me a favor. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God? No. Say the Word and you'll be free. Say the Word and be like me. I never said those points. Don't put words in my mouth. Now you can introduce your own points, but don't do that cheesy thing where you go in the beginning, you said, and then you say whatever you want to say. I'm cool. You can say what you want to say. And probably in a different class, at another place, another time, I'll say something like Krishna's all perfect and this and that. I certainly don't disagree with that statement. But, and this is for everybody, when you're talking to somebody and you quote them to them, Make sure you're actually quoting them. Usually people don't do that. Usually people just say, hey, just like you were saying, and then they just spew whatever nonsense they want to say. Like they think somehow really now you have to agree with them because they said you said it. But it doesn't work like that. At least not if somebody's a little bit meticulous in their hearing. We got to learn how to hear. We got to learn how to speak. We got to learn how to think. We got to learn how to troubleshoot. And so part of what we're doing now is a little bit of an exercise in critical thinking applied to an interesting verse in one of our sacred texts. You keep that volume, and you make all the points you want to make, and you make them as your own. And I'll give you fair play. Keep going.
Okay. When you were talking about the perfect, like a really, the philosopher who is very serious about philosophy and saying, here are my counter arguments to my arguments. It makes sense to me that Krishna would do that about his own text because he's an all perfect. So that makes sense to me that he would counter argument himself because he would probably be like the ultimate philosopher.
That's a great point. It's incomplete. But I'm gonna come back to it in a minute. It's a good point. But you would have to say it more. You'd have to say it more coherently and completely to make it into an answer to my question. What you've got right there is like a couple of loose associations. You've got a great idea, but you didn't explain it clearly. So if I already know what the answer is, and I already know what you want to say, because I'm good like that, I can make sense out of what you're saying. But if I don't know the answer and where you're headed and how you think, I won't be able to turn what you said into a logical point. You're like a couple of loose associations and a really great point. You just got to figure out how to build it. And we're going to do that in a minute. I'm not going to do it now unless somebody else has a swing. It wasn't a swing and a miss. It's like a bunt. We're going to turn that into a base hit. Just give me a minute. Who else? Oh, you getting both of you? All right. Now I'm scared. I was intrigued by David, and now I'm legitimately shaking over here.
Well, the Vedas describe a lot of Hindu gods, and they're not all for materialism. So I think the point Krishna's trying to make is how you use the Vedas. Is it for material gain or is it for spiritual?
Excellent. That's an excellent, clean answer. I'm just going to repeat what you said in case it wasn't loud enough. The Vedas, they do have various gods. There's Cathenotheism, the term coined by Max Muller, the original Indologist in the 1800s, who pretty much invented the study of India, the academic study of India, what became known as Indological studies. Max Muller coined a term called Cathenotheism because the Vedas, actual Vedas, like the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and the Atharva Veda, but really the three, Rig, Yajur, and Sama. They glorify different deities, like Indra, it's a pretty big deity in the Vedas. And they'll glorify Indra, and they'll make it sound like Indra is the supreme lord of all creation. Then they'll glorify Agni. Agni is another pretty big Vedic god. And they'll make Agni sound like he is the supreme lord. And it's vexing because monolatry, many gods, but only one of them is worthy of worship. Polytheism, many gods, and kind of hedge your bets by worshiping many gods. Monotheism is one ring to rule them all. These are all different types of theistic systems which existed. But he'd never seen a system. Henotheism, where gods are worshipped there might be a pantheon of gods, and you might worship them one after another. Or you pick and choose which one you want to worship. There may be many gods, but you're then devoted to one god. But then Cathenotheism is where there's many gods, and they each sound like they're the supreme when they're being glorified. It's, of course, a very Indian thing, right? You're like, hey, this is my best friend. This is my best friend my whole life. And you're like, who's that guy? He's also my best friend. And he is my very best friend. Like, well, which one's your best? No, they're all my best friends. Like, who is that? That's my cousin. Who's that? That's also my cousin. Who's that? You're also my cousin. Like, your blood cousin? No. My village cousin. everybody's your cousin, everybody's your uncle, everybody's your best friend, right? And so you get this, culturally in India, it's very, very normal and apropos, and it's not considered to be disturbing at all to just heap praise on your friends and beloved ones. And everybody's your relative and everybody's your best friend, right? And it's like totally natural, right? You're like, "This is my best friend," and somebody else walks in, "This is my best friend too," and like nobody bats an eyelash. And they're thinking like, "Yeah, we do that." All the brown people are like, "Yeah, we do it." They're all laughing because like, God, it is funny, isn't it? From a Western's point of view, it is kind of funny. Because we've got all those hierarchies in the West. Everything's got to fit in where it's supposed to go. So Max Mueller made this observation because it bothered him. That the Vedic gods all seem to be glorified like they're the supreme, and you're left wondering, well, who's really the supreme? They have a concept of supreme, but who's really the supreme? If you look at the way Agni and Vayu and Indra and Rudra, the big gods of the Veda, are glorified. They're glorified for their power. They're not glorified for their transcendence. Only one deity in the Veda is glorified for their transcendence. Any guess? Vishnu. Krishna, the word Krishna comes up in the Veda. Krishna means black, but like Krishna as a full-fledged concept comes a little later on in the Vedic pantheon. It's more articulated in later Vedic texts, not in the original Rig Veda. Vishnu is the deity in the Rig Veda. And Vishnu, in the glorification of Vishnu, it's always this transcendent being. Do you guys follow this? I played a game called Dungeons & Dragons as a kid. Don't hate me because I'm beautiful. And they had a book called Deities and Demigods, which I bought when I was 8 years old when I first started playing the game. Came out in 1980 or 1981. I bought it. Thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And so, I learned about Babylonian deities and Norse deities and Roman deities, et cetera, and Egyptian gods. And I was into mythology as a kid growing up. Like really into mythology. Greek mythology, Norse mythology. Read a lot as a kid growing up. And in the whole book, they had hundreds of different deities in different traditions, which were glorified. Of course, they didn't have the Judeo-Christian deities. That would have been fun, but they didn't do that. But they had, what's that guy's name? The Twisted Rider?
Lovecraft.
Yeah, Lovecraft. They had Lovecraftian deities. And so, thank you. So, I just pulled that one out. Like, I didn't need much to go on. I'm impressed. That Twisted, I was like either Poe or Lovecraft, right? You went with Lovecraft, I rolled the dice on it. So, then under Vishnu, they had that Vishnu could never be killed. And you could fight with him, but at a certain point, like if you fought with him too hard, he would just disappear. But there was no way to kill Vishnu. And I thought that was far out. I'm like, somehow or other, even the dude who wrote the book, picking meat out of his teeth, smoking cigarettes, doing whatever other thing he was doing, somehow, like, at least even he in his checking out of the world religions was able to realize, oh, Vishnu is actually like a supreme being, unkillable, eternal being. Got that? Do you guys follow this? So, sorry for that tangent. When Vishnu is glorified in the Vedas, he's actually a minor deity. Shows up infrequently in the old Veda. But when he does show up, he's always glorified as being transcendental. And it's not his power that you worship, it's his transcendence. Do you follow this? So Krishna's critique in this text is not a critique of the Veda just for the sake of critiquing the Veda. It's a critique of those portions of the Vedas that give you rebirth. in a higher family. That's like a little, like there should be like if we're gonna write a book and try to understand this verse, at the beginning we have to say, hey, heaven in the Vedic literature isn't an eternal place. It's like a better neighborhood in our universe, where you live a little longer and you enjoy a little more, but it's not the same as the Christian idea of heaven as an eternal place. That would be the Paravyom, the spiritual sky, or Vaikuntha, the place of no miseries. There is a eternal abode, Param Gati, a supreme goal, Param Dham, there's a supreme destination that's spoken of in the Gita itself. But that can be contrasted with Swarga. Swarga is a material heaven where you still die, where you still suffer birth, death, old age, disease. It's just over a much longer period of time with a lot more enjoyment mixed in. You guys follow this? That would have to be in our introduction. Then when it says, oh, it's for going to heaven, you would know it means going to heaven with a lowercase h, not with an uppercase h. Do you guys follow that? Another one is this, you get rebirth. Rebirth is bad in the Veda, not good. The goal is to transcend the world and not be reborn again. So if you get rebirth, it means you continue with your karma, it means you fail at the game of life. You didn't figure out how to solve the Rubik's Cube. You gotta press reset and play again. That's another important premise to put into place. Then the verse starts to make sense because you've got your premises in place, you've got your starting points in place, and you can make sense out of it. So my man's critique is spot on. He's critiquing people who are kamatmana, filled with desire, swarga para, wanting to go to heaven. Jama karma, balam pradam, giving you rebirth. Bhog aishwarya, gatim prati, you want enjoyment, you want power, you want opulence. Those people, and the kriya vishesha bahulam, the rituals they do to accomplish those material things, that's what I'm criticizing. And I'm the loyal opposition. I'm going to sift through the Veda and tell you what's good, just like Jesus sifted through the Bible. He said, my Father had 10 commandments, I only got 2. Just like God in the Hebrew Bible, the God of the Jews, in the Jewish text, said, my belly's filled with burnt offerings, I won't accept them anymore. My belly is filled with blood and burnt offerings. I don't want them. I want mercy and not sacrifice. The Elohim, or Yahweh, the God of Jews, critiqued the Jewish sacrificial cult in the Hebrew Bible that was articulated in the Hebrew Bible. Later on in the book of Hosea, he critiqued it. Do you guys follow this? And so you find this sometimes within a text. You'll find an evolution out of the lower limbs of that text, out of the lower offerings of that text, out of the lower ideas of that text. And you get a master's course and an undergraduate course in the same text. And then you figure out like what you're qualified for. Did you guys get that? So what Krishna's really doing here is in sifting through. Because he said to Krishna, hey Krishna, what are those portions of the Vedas which aren't Bhogashwara Prati? They're not aimed for enjoyment and opulence. Whether people who are akam, who are desirous, who are not swarga, devoted to going to the lowercase heaven, but they want to go to the param dham, the supreme abode. Are their rituals okay? Is their attachment to their tradition okay? Because Krishna doesn't make a wholesale critique, although I try to lead you guys, I try to mislead you guys in that direction initially. He makes a critique with very specific criteria for what qualifies you for falling under that critique. And it's your motivation. It's your reasons. Which leaves the door open. Could there be a ritual which isn't designed for material enjoyment? Could we ritualize the goal of transcendence? Could we come up with good technologies for moving forward progressively towards spirituality, towards transcendence, towards truth, with capital T? Is ritual automatically bad? Or is it bad when the goal of it's bad, or it's put together poorly, when it doesn't lead you to the goal, when it leads to the wrong goal? Do you guys follow this? That stuff's all there in the text. You just got to read a little carefully. so you don't get caught up like with all monkeys like bananas, and now he likes bananas, therefore he's a monkey. So, excellent. You nailed it. And to go back to Dale for a sec. Say your point again.
I was saying how an expert philosopher would counteract their own arguments and say this is debatable. This is you can't debate this. Of course, Krishna would do that with his own Vedas.
Yeah, and so Krishna is that loyal opposition. He's sculpting his argument. He's trying to get us to a very fine point. And so it appears very critical, but if you look at it carefully, the critique is not absolute. It's a critique to very specific things. And that's what he said that you wanted to say, but you didn't quite get there, that he has specific points he's critiquing. You follow? And then we articulated those. And if you want to glorify me a little bit, which you also want to do, you could say, and I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, leading you to get to that point, and you're correct. That's exactly what I was hoping you guys would do. You'd be able to pierce through the verse and get to what was being said. So you noted that as well. Good. All right. Final points? Yes. Are you sure you have a final point?
Well, I have a question.
Are you sure you have a question?
Yes.
That's what I'm looking for. Confidence. Let's go for it.
So you've given a talk on blind faith before, and you've mentioned that having a sense of doubt is really healthy. So I'm wondering if this one is potentially
Sure.
giving us a free
Yeah, that works.
that bit of
Yeah,
doubt,
sure, that works.
kind of like a rebellious teen doing it, do this, and do the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, Krishna doesn't glorify doubt in the Gita. Doubt is glorified in the Bhagavatam. It's not really glorified in the Gita. Doubt is kind of criticized in the Gita a little bit. You need a little bit of faith to just get up in the morning. If I don't think that your hypothesis is worth pursuing at all, then I'm not going to buy what you sell. And so at least some faith has to be there in the beginning. Shouldn't be blind, for sure. Should have your eyes open. At some point you got to troubleshoot doubts and think through stuff. And that's, like I said, that's definitely mentioned in our text. I can't recall off the top of my head doubt being glorified in the Vedas per se. But certainly questions are glorified. Krishna mentions you should approach teachers with questions. And so that would indicate that those questions are things you're not sure about. I mean, I guess Krishna says, he says, Pariprashnena, Seva, there's questions in service. So that's how you're supposed to approach teachers. So that indicates that questions are good. Questions is really just a fancy way of saying I have doubts, something I'm not sure about. And if you look at the Gita as a whole, what is the Gita? The Gita is Arjuna expressing doubts and Krishna helping him to resolve them. So you can't really not glorify doubts because the entire Gita is the successful resolution of Arjuna's doubts. Do you guys follow that? So if I wanted to argue for doubts being appreciated in the Gita, those would be the way plays I would find it. I was quoting from the Bhagavatam when I said that to you. There is no way to become realized in a subject without thinking through it carefully. And there's no way to think through it carefully, which doesn't lead you to have questions and things you don't know about, and doesn't lead you to search for answers. And so certainly Krishna here is showing you that he's not looking for a blind faith in the Veda. Now, he's not really establishing what is the goal of the Veda in this particular text. He's not establishing what good ritual does look like. I didn't want, like I said, I want to just kind of focus on a small piece of the puzzle. But just to wrap it up, anybody else want to chime in? Just to wrap it all up. We have a simple ritual. Our whole tradition is a real simple ritual. We cry out to God shamelessly. And you know what we ask for? Huh?
Help.
Okay.
We ask for nothing. You guys just haven't thought enough about the mantra that we're about to chant. We chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna is the names of God. There is no ask. We're just chanting the name of God. Like you said, Jesus, 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 or Elohim, Elohim, Yahweh. Yahweh, 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 Elohim, Yahweh, Elohim, 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 Yahweh, Yahweh. That's the God of the Hebrew Bible. There's nothing, there's no ask. You're just chanting the name of God over and over again. That's a ritual. When do we do it? Well, we do it when we're alone. When nobody else is watching, we chant. And then we get together and we chant together. So you gotta have a private ritual, private practice, and you gotta have stuff you do together as a group. What do we do together as a group? We chant. What do we do in private? Chant. So we have like a fellowship group thing we do, and then we have private individuals like journaling and group therapy. And both of our things involve chanting. And what do we chant? We don't chant mantras. Sometimes we call it the Maha Mantra. It's not really a mantra because there's no grammar in it and we're not asking for anything. Mantras are incantations, they're spells. You're asking for something. You're doing something. We're just chanting the name of God. It's called Nam Kirtan. Kirtan of the name of God. It's called Nam Sankirtan, the collective group kirtan of the name of God. It's called Prem Nam Sankirtan. It's the collective kirtan of the name of God chanted with love. That's our movement. Prem Nam Sankirtan. We cry out to Krishna in gay abandon, shamelessly, with no reservations, helplessly. Are we crying out for help? Sure. Are we crying out for service? Sure. But we're really just crying out to get Krishna's attention. Here I am. Where are you? That is a ritual. It's a technology. It's a system. One that our tribe has been working on for thousands of years. We got into the harmonium a couple hundred years ago. It's a French instrument. It's a reed instrument. What's the value in a reed instrument? Mimics the human voice. What does it do? It augments and accentuates and elevates the voice of the singer. That's why we grabbed a hold of that a couple hundred years ago. Most of our instruments are thousands of years old. Clay drums and, metal cymbals. I mean, you're going back to like the dawn of creation at that point. Those instruments are just designed to be accoutrements to the main instrument, which is your voice. Other traditions will play fancy music like Qawwali. They're like way cooler. You guys know what Qawwali music is. Sufi, Pakistani, North Indian music. We hate that stuff. We don't hate that stuff, but they don't chant. They'll chant a little bit, and they'll get all fancy and lusty, you know what I mean? Play their music, show off. We're not feeling it. What we do when we're really getting deep, we cut the instruments and just sing a cappella. Then we go home and do it a cappella. Then we get back to, we sit together and chant. Ourselves, like we'll sit in a group and all chant japa together. It's like a good time for us. And then we chant and cry out to Krishna. Put it all on the line. And our argument's real simple. Krishna's all good and all powerful. I know that from Dalen. He taught me that. And so he's all good. He wants to help me. He's all powerful. He can help me. All I need to do is open that door. That act of opening that door is our ritual. You follow that? We have a simple ritual. The ritual is not filled with desire, trying to get something material, trying to make a power move. It's the opposite. Krishna says, Satatam Kirtiyanto Mam. My devotees are always chanting about me. That's our program. It's a really simple ritual. It's a really simple technique. You can try it right now. Why don't we do that? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.